Hello, my name is Gerard Seijts. I'm the Executive Director of the E&O in the Towage Institute for Leadership here at the Richard Ivey School of Business. Today with me is Bruce Avolio. Bruce is a leading scholar in the area of business leadership at the Forster School of Business at the University of Washington. He's also the Executive Director of the Forster Center for Leadership. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you very much.
Bruce, I have a number of questions for you. Questions about your career and also your passion in research, which is leadership. So let me start with this question. As a young person, what got you so excited about the topic of leadership that made you decide to devote your career to it?
I think the specific things that I go back to is I was very interested in history, and I read a lot in high school, even before high school. I remember the librarian asking me why I was reading about the Third Reich. Well, and my mother was Jewish, and so there was a lot of things about that period of time that I wanted to unpack and try to understand. And that, I just have always been interested in the history that's associated with leadership and culture and things like that. And so if I were to tie it back to anything, what I still read is history books, biographies, and it aligns with my interest in leadership.
Great. Obviously, you have a long and distinguished career, conducted numerous studies on leadership. What study are you most proud of? Why? And what were the main findings of that study?
That's a good question. First of all, I've never done studies alone, so it's in part the people I have worked with that make up how I feel about the study, and also I think the contribution that it's made to the field. I guess there are two studies. I'll mention one. One study was a true field experiment, which means we randomly assigned instructors and participants to different conditions, which is very difficult to do. This was done with the Israeli Defense Force. I was responsible for developing the instructors to deliver on the model and the framework and so forth, and most of them spoke more Hebrew than English. And so, number one, that was an amazingly difficult challenge to not only translate sometimes in English to people what leadership is, but to translate it from English to Hebrew to their understanding, and I don't speak Hebrew. And the effects, it is one of the classic studies now in the literature, in that the effects of that particular project showed that not only could we change leadership, we can impact performance 6-9 months later. And really one of the most controlled field studies that we've done. So when people say, can you make leadership, there's no doubt in my mind. And there's more evidence that we have, but there's no doubt, of course we can make leadership, even translate it into a different language.
Great, great. One of your current research interests centers around accelerating positive forms of leadership.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on what that research stream entails and talk a little bit about your discoveries so far?
It's the idea that leadership tends to get developed in the context where you are challenged to do something, to lead, to have an impact on people. And my interest was trying to figure out what are the things in that context of challenges and opportunities that affect the way people learn how to lead. And it started back about 10 years ago, that when I was interviewing leaders, even further back, they'd oftentimes talk about moments in their relationships with people or in serendipitous situations, things that just happened that stuck with them for a long period of time. And we started to think, instead of having a longer leadership development program, maybe we should try to replicate the moments that matter in people's development, because that's what seems to accelerate them in those points where they really are engaging in something that's meaningful. So it comes from that. So examples are, just a comment someone makes to you as maybe your first leadership role, that 25 years later you say, that was foundational to my think. I didn't realize it then, but it was foundational. One example that I like to use is we had Warren Buffett come and visit when I was at the University of Nebraska, and we asked him about moments that mattered, and he talked about what success meant and how Rose Blumkin, who was a Holocaust survivor, said to him one time, Warren, success is how many people will hide you. And if you think about that, go through your list of friends and family and relationships. By hiding, she meant put your life on the line. Would your family, would your employees, would anyone do that for you? And for him, he said, success is not the money in any way for him. Success is his relationships. And so that's just an example. And if you can find out what those are and relate that to people, then they can start to look for them. Not just it happens, you actually seek out these kind of moments.
And so the idea is that people are more aware, you prime them for learning.
Right, so they become more mindful. It also led us to look at readiness of leaders to develop. So I know there have been moments in my life it was like, I guess I didn't get that one. I wasn't really ready, intellectually, emotionally. And so the leader, individual, has to be ready. And there are ways we can get them ready, like suspending judgment. When something happens, if you suspend judgment, you'll be more mindful of what it means to you. It takes a little bit longer, moments, not hours. And so that's one way to help people kind of be more connected to where these moments are and how they can use them.
Yeah, great. The field of leadership, I think, is very fragmented, right? So in that context, what do you think are kind of the three or the two or the one big leadership questions that you believe need to be addressed in order to move the field of leadership forward in a meaningful direction? The big questions these days that you believe are important to address.
Well, there's two things that come to mind, and then I'll find the third, but I think they'll be related to the third. And so the first is, the question is, what is the source of leadership? And when you stop and think about that, ask a group of your executives what the source of leadership is, and you'll get a variety of answers. You'll get from born traits to being in a CEO position to my team, and a lot of things in between. And so if you explore that and you say, well, is the source of leadership followership? And if so, in what way? And oftentimes, the success of leadership is sourced through the followership, or through peers, or through a multiplicity of leaders who are impacting what you do, your board. And so when you start to ask that question, we haven't really delved into that very deeply because we've assumed the source of leadership is the leader. We do that in MBA programs, we do that in training, because we bring leaders to training, right? If the source of leadership was followers, we bring followers to training, or both. The second is the transmission, and to me the transmission is changing dramatically. And what I mean by that is, I'm transmitting to you, I'm communicating, I'm giving you some of my ideas on this. I behave and you are, that transmission of my behavior tells you something about what I want. Well, we know that leaders now transmit through a variety of different mechanisms, not least of which technology, webinars and through email and through blogs and all sorts of other mechanisms. How is that transmission affecting what we call leadership and its impact? So those are two, I think, really important things. If you just say, what's the source and how is that source transmitted, you get into a variety of different things. So it's kind of the kernels in the sense of, sort of software that you start to unpack. And then I think the third really important question is, what constitutes the total leadership system that we should be examining? So I ask a lot of people in my classes or in training, I said, here's your organization and here's a crowd. I'm going to crowdsource this problem, or I'm going to have your organization take it on. Who do you think will get it done quicker? most always they pick the crowd. Almost always. And I think the crowd, what is the leadership of a crowd that actually can accomplish something that an organization, which supposedly with these roles of leadership, can't? And so that's the third thing, is kind of deciding or figuring out what's the scope of the total leadership system. Because looking at my relationship with my staff only tells you a small amount about what are things that are impacting them in the larger system that they're in. And I think that's the third thing we really have to do. And it relates back to source and transmission.
So 2 follow-up questions, if I may. You actually conducted a number of studies on followership. And so what are some of the key discoveries in that area?
The followers who have a sense of ownership don't let leaders go off the cliff. And by ownership, I mean more than just I'm accountable. I have a sense of identification. Identify with this. I can't let you do this. Or I want to support you in this. I'm willing to self-sacrifice for this. So that's one. And the other piece of that is followers are also developmentally ready or not for initiating things. And so if you're trying something and they're not engaging in it, it might be that they too are not developmentally ready. I think that the third is I could tell a lot about organizations' leaders without ever meeting the leaders, because the followers are a reflection of what I end up seeing in the leader anyhow. And so if the followers are independent, willing to challenge, feel safe to do so, own what they are charged with, and feel a deep sense of making it right, those things change the leadership lens of the organization, the way you look at it.
Yeah. So final question. We're delighted to have you here at the school. You're presenting here on leadership. And the title of your presentation is Examining the Total Leadership System, Viewing it from the Inside Out and Outside In. And so you talked a little already about that, but what are the highlights of the presentations? And I think especially for managers, what are some of the key takeaways from your work on this particular area?
Well, if you own any stock in a public company, you'll be interested in what I have to say. And the reason why I say that is part of what I'll talk about tomorrow is how financial analysts value the leadership in valuing the firm. And so a few years back, we kind of discovered that financial analysts like us are interested in leadership. And they will discount a firm based on their perceptions of leadership, not by 1 or 2%, but 5 to 15 to 20%. So we're talking about, multiple years of organic growth. They're adjusting the value of leadership, which changes the value they assign to the organization. And that is something I find really interesting and scary, having stocks in my retirement portfolio, that what they judge it on is things that are oftentimes very rudimentary, very subjective, hard to get them to put a number on it, except at the end of the day where they say, I'm moving the firm's value by 15% because I don't trust the leadership, or they don't seem to have a clear focus, or they don't have good presence, or things like that. So I'm going to talk about that by looking at leadership from the outside in. And I think it has relevance for our business programs, because we're not teaching our business students that analysts do this. And we teach business students on how to develop their leadership. I'm talking about their management of the accounting, financial, marketing, IT, now leadership value of the organization. That's what I want to talk about.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're
Look forward
welcome.
to the presentation.
It's great to be here at Ivey again.
All right. Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.